The child's scream cut through the blizzard like a knife through flesh. Caleb Thornton pulled hard on the reins, his horse fighting against the wind. Through the wall of white, he saw her, a little girl, no more than 5, kneeling in the snow beside a woman's body. Her small hands were blue. Her voice was raw, and she was trying to drag her mother's lifeless form toward a tree that offered no shelter. "Mama, wake up. Please, Mama, you promised we'd be safe." Caleb dismounted before he knew he was moving. If this story touches your heart, I'd love for you to subscribe to our channel and follow Clara, Rosie, and Caleb's journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. Montana Territory, November 1879. The child's scream cut through the blizzard like a knife through flesh. Caleb Thornton pulled hard on the reins, his horse fighting against the wind. 8 years he'd ridden these mountains alone. 8 years since he'd buried his wife and son in the meadow behind his cabin. 8 years of silence, of work, of forgetting. But that scream, God help him, that scream sounded exactly like his boy's voice the night the fever took him. He dismounted before he knew he was moving. Through the wall of white he saw her. A little girl, no more than 5, kneeling in the snow beside a woman's body. The child's hands were blue, her coat too thin for this weather. She was pulling at the woman's arm, trying to drag her toward a cluster of bare trees that offered no shelter from the killing cold. "Mama, wake up. Please, Mama, you promised we'd be safe." Caleb's boots sank deep into the snow. The wind screamed around him, biting at every inch of exposed skin. The girl didn't see him coming. She was too focused on her mother, too lost in her desperate mission. "Hey!" he called out. "Hey, little one!" The girl's head snapped up. Wild eyes, red from crying, locked onto him with pure terror. "No!" she shrieked. She threw herself over her mother's body, arms spread wide. "You can't have her. She's mine. Go away." Caleb raised both hands, palms out. "Easy now. I ain't here to hurt nobody." That's what the bad men said. That's what they always say. He stopped moving, crouched down slowly, making himself smaller against the howling wind. The girl couldn't be more than 40 pounds, but she stared at him like she was ready to fight a grizzly. "What's your name?" he asked. "Don't matter." "It matters to me." The girl's chin trembled. Snow caked her eyelashes. "Rosie. That's a pretty name. I'm Caleb." He nodded toward the woman. "That your mama?" "She's sleeping. She got tired. She said she needed to rest just for a minute." Rosie's voice cracked. "But she won't wake up. I keep telling her we gotta go. We gotta keep moving, but she won't listen." Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd seen this before during the war. Soldiers who lay down in the snow and never got up. The body giving out what the mind refused to accept. "Rosie, I need to check on your mama. Can I do that?" "No." "I used to be a doctor. I helped people get better." Rosie's eyes narrowed with suspicion, far too old for her face. "You're lying." "I ain't. I was a doctor in the Army. A long time ago. The Army kills people. Sometimes, but mostly, I tried to save them." The wind shifted, driving snow sideways across them both. The girl shivered violently. Her lips were turning gray. "Rosie, listen to me. You're gonna freeze to death out here. So's your mama if she ain't already. Now I've got a warm cabin about 2 miles east. Hot fire, food, medicine. But we gotta move now, or none of us are making it through this storm." "How do I know you ain't lying?" Caleb reached slowly into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. Inside was a silver cross on a chain his wife's. He'd carried it every day since she died. "This belonged to someone I loved very much. I'm gonna give it to you to hold. If I do anything to hurt you or your mama, you throw it in the fire. That's my promise." Rosie stared at the cross, then at him, then back at her mother. She's really cold, the girl whispered. She won't stop shaking. Caleb moved forward carefully like approaching a wounded animal. He pressed 2 fingers against the woman's neck. For a long moment, he felt nothing. Then there. A pulse. Weak and thready, but present. She's alive, he said, but barely. We gotta go. Right now. He shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the woman. She was thin beneath her worn traveling clothes, her face pale as the snow around them. Late 20s, maybe. Dark hair escaping from a bonnet that had seen better days. You're gonna get cold, Rosie said, watching him with those 2 old eyes. I'll manage. Can you walk? Course I can walk. I ain't a baby. Despite everything, Caleb almost smiled. No, ma'am, I can see that. He lifted the woman in his arms. She weighed almost nothing. How long had they been running? How long since she'd had a proper meal? Her head lolled against his chest, but she moaned softly, and that small sound gave him hope. Stay right beside me, he told Rosie. Hold on to my belt. Don't let go for nothing, you hear? Yes, sir. They walked into the teeth of the storm. The 2 miles felt like 20. Caleb kept his eyes on the faint outline of the mountain ridge, using it to navigate through the white blindness. Every few minutes he looked down to make sure Rosie was still there, still holding tight to his belt with her frozen little fingers. The girl didn't complain. Not once. She trudged through snow that came up to her knees, her jaw set with determination that would have impressed men twice her age. Almost there, he kept saying. Almost there, little one. I ain't little. No, ma'am, you surely ain't. The cabin appeared through the blizzard like a miracle. Low and sturdy, built into the hillside smoke, still trickling from the chimney where he'd banked the fire that morning. Caleb kicked open the door and carried the woman inside, laying her on the bed near the stove. Get those wet clothes off, he told Rosie. There's blankets in that chest. Wrap yourself up tight. He worked fast, years of battlefield medicine coming back to him like muscle memory. He stripped the wet outer layers from the woman's body, wrapped her in every dry blanket he owned, and stoked the fire until the cabin blazed with heat. He heated water, found his old medical kit, checked her pulse again. Stronger now. The warmth was working. Is she gonna die? Caleb turned. Rosie stood by the stove, drowning in one of his flannel shirts, clutching his wife's cross in both hands. Not if I can help it. People always die, no matter what you do. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Who told you that? Nobody, I just know. Rosie's voice was flat empty. My daddy died. Then his brother said Mama wasn't fit to take care of me. He wanted to send me away to some school. Mama said no, so we ran. How long you been running? Forever. Caleb looked at this child, this tiny girl who'd watched her father die, who'd fled across the country with her mother, who'd held onto a corpse in a blizzard because she had nothing else left. Come here, he said. Rosie didn't move. Come on now, you've been brave long enough. Let me take a turn. Something in his voice must have reached her. She walked to him slowly, and when he opened his arms, she fell into them. Her small body shook with sobs she'd been holding back for God knows how long. I don't want Mama to die, she cried into his chest. Please don't let her die, please. Caleb held her tight, one hand on the back of her head. I'm going to do everything I can. You hear me? Everything. Promise. He should have said no. He knew better than to make promises he couldn't keep. But looking down at this child, this fierce little warrior who'd fought a blizzard with nothing but love and stubbornness, he couldn't do it. I promise. The woman's fever came that night hard and fast. Caleb had seen fevers like this before. The body pushed past its limits, fighting back with everything it had left. She thrashed in the bed, crying out in her delirium, calling for Rosie, begging someone named Edmund to stop. Don't, please, Edmund, don't, not in front of her. Caleb pressed cool cloths to her forehead. Easy, easy now. You're safe. Rosie, where's Rosie? She's right here. She's sleeping by the fire. She's safe. The woman's eyes flew open, wild and unfocused. She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Don't let him take her, please. I'll do anything. I'll die before I let him take her. Nobody's taking nobody. You're in my cabin. You're safe. She stared at him, chest heaving. Then her eyes rolled back and she slipped into unconsciousness again. Caleb sat back on his heels, heart pounding. Edmund. The name meant nothing to him, but the terror in her voice meant everything. He worked through the night, forcing water between her cracked lips, changing the compresses on her forehead, keeping the fire burning hot. Rosie woke twice, padding over on silent feet to check on her mother, then retreating back to her nest of blankets by the stove. Near dawn, the fever broke. The woman's breathing steadied. Her color improved. She stopped thrashing and lay still, peaceful for the first time since he'd found her. Caleb allowed himself to exhale. In the corner, Rosie stirred. Is she better? She's fighting and winning. Mama always wins, even when she doesn't look like she's gonna. I believe it. Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then, what's your name again? Caleb. Like in the Bible, the one who went to the promised land. He blinked, surprised. That's right. Your mama teach you that. She taught me everything. Rosie pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Are we in the promised land now, Mr. Caleb? He looked around his cabin. The rough-hewn walls, the simple furniture he'd built with his own hands, the empty chair where his wife used to sit. I don't rightly know, he said honestly, but I reckon we could make it one if we tried hard enough. 3 days passed. The blizzard raged on, trapping them in the cabin together. Caleb rationed his supplies carefully. He'd planned for a long winter, but not for 3 mouths instead of 1. Still, he made sure Rosie ate first at every meal, and he pretended not to be hungry when there wasn't quite enough to go around. On the 3rd night, the woman finally woke for real. Caleb was dozing in his chair when he heard her gasp. He opened his eyes to find her sitting up in bed, looking around frantically. Rosie! She's here. He pointed to the small form curled up by the fire. Sleeping. She's fine. The woman's eyes found her daughter, and something in her shoulders released. Then her gaze snapped back to Caleb, and everything tensed up again. Who are you? Where am I? What did you do to me? My name's Caleb Thornton. You're in my cabin about 30 miles outside of Helena. And what I did was keep you from freezing to death in that storm. I don't believe you. That's your right, but believing or not believing won't change the facts. She swung her legs off the bed, tried to stand, and immediately collapsed. Caleb moved to help her, but she shoved his hands away. Don't touch me. He stepped back, hands raised. Fine, don't gotta touch you. But you've been unconscious for 3 days with a fever that almost killed you. Your body ain't ready for heroics yet. The woman glared at him with eyes that burned despite her weakness. Green eyes, he noticed now. Fierce and frightened all at once. Did Victor send you? I don't know any Victor. His brother then, the lawyers, the hired men. Her voice rose with each word. Is this some kind of trap? Make me think I'm safe, then drag me back to Boston in chains. Lady, I don't know a soul in Boston, and I ain't dragged anybody anywhere since the war ended. I found you dying in a snowstorm. Your daughter was trying to save you with nothing but her bare hands and a whole lot of stubbornness. I brought you here because leaving you there wasn't something I could do and still call myself a man. She stared at him, breathing hard. Something flickered in those green eyes. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the faintest crack in her armor. Why? She whispered. Why would you help us? You don't know us. Caleb looked away toward the window where the storm still howled. 8 years ago, I lost my wife and my boy. Fever took them one right after the other. I was a doctor, and I couldn't save them. I've spent every day since then trying to forget that I failed. He turned back to face her. When I heard your girl screaming in that storm, I had a choice. I could keep riding and fail again, or I could try." He paused. "I'm tired of failing." The woman said nothing, but her hands, which had been clenched into fists, slowly relaxed. "Mama." They both turned. Rosie stood in the middle of the cabin, hair wild from sleep, clutching Caleb's wife's cross in her hands. "Rosie." The woman's voice broke. She opened her arms and the girl flew into them, nearly knocking her mother back onto the bed. "You came back. I knew you would. Mr. Caleb said you were fighting, and I told him you always win, and you did, Mama, you did." The woman held her daughter tight, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Caleb stood quietly watching them, mother and daughter clinging to each other like the last survivors of a shipwreck. After a long moment, the woman looked up at him over Rosie's head. Her expression had changed. Not soft, not trusting, but something closer to neutral. "Clara," she said quietly. "My name is Clara Millbrook." "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Millbrook." "It's Miss. Or it will be once I finish running." She pressed her lips together. "I don't know how to thank you. For saving us." "You don't gotta thank me. Just get better. That's thanks enough." Rosie pulled back from her mother's embrace. "Mr. Caleb made soup, Mama. Real soup with meat and everything. And he let me help stir it. And he said I was the bravest girl he ever met." Clara's eyebrows rose slightly. She looked at Caleb. "I ain't in the habit of lying to children," he said. For just a moment, so brief he might have imagined it, the corner of Clara's mouth twitched upward. Then she pulled Rosie close again and closed her eyes. "We'll talk more tomorrow," she said. "Right now, I just want to hold my daughter." Caleb nodded and moved toward the door, pulling on his coat. "Where are you going?" Clara asked, suddenly alert. "Barn. Gotta check on the horses. Don't worry, I'll be back before the fire dies down." "You're leaving us alone." He paused with his hand on the door handle. "The rifle's above the mantel. Shells are in the tin on the shelf. If I'm not back in an hour, assume the worst and shoot anyone who comes through that door. That ain't me." Clara blinked at him. "You're giving me access to your weapons. We just met. I could be anyone." "You could be, but you're not." Caleb opened the door and the wind screamed into the cabin. "Get some rest, Miss Millbrook. We've got a long winter ahead." He stepped out into the storm and pulled the door shut behind him. Inside the cabin, Clara held Rosie in the flickering firelight, listening to the wind rage against the walls. Her body ached, her mind raced. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab her daughter and flee into the night before this stranger revealed himself to be just like all the others. But Rosie was warm. Rosie was safe. Rosie was already falling back asleep, her small hand wrapped around Clara's fingers. And that man Caleb, he'd looked at her with eyes that held no hunger, no calculation, no hidden agenda. Just sadness. Old deep sadness that she recognized because she saw it every time she looked in a mirror. "Mama," Rosie murmured sleepily. "Yes, baby. I think Mr. Caleb is a good man." Clara stroked her daughter's hair. "Why do you think that?" "Because when I was really scared, he gave me something that belonged to someone he loved. He said if he broke his promise, I could burn it." Rosie held up the silver cross. "He hasn't broken his promise yet." Clara stared at the cross glinting in the firelight. A dead wife's cross given to a stranger's child as collateral for kindness. What kind of man did that? She didn't know. But for the first time in months, maybe years, she wanted to find out. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, Clara Millbrook fell asleep, holding her daughter, a stranger's cross between them, and hope flickering like a candle in the dark. The morning light came thin and gray, filtering through frost-covered windows. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of her daughter's laughter. It had been so long since Rosie laughed like that. Clara kept her eyes closed for just a moment longer, holding on to the sound, terrified that if she moved, if she breathed, it would stop. But it didn't stop. And somewhere deep inside her frozen heart, Something that had been dead for a very long time began slowly to thaw. The morning light came thin and gray through frost-covered windows. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of her daughter's laughter. It had been so long since Rosie laughed like that. She kept her eyes closed for just a moment longer, holding on to the sound, terrified that if she moved, if she breathed, it would stop. But it didn't stop. And somewhere deep inside her, frozen heart, something that had been dead for a very long time, began slowly to thaw. Higher. Mr. Caleb, make him go higher. Clara opened her eyes. Across the cabin, Caleb sat on a wooden stool with Rosie perched on his knee. He was bouncing her gently while making a carved wooden horse gallop through the air. The horse was rough, clearly whittled by unpracticed hands, but Rosie watched it like it was the most magnificent thing she'd ever seen. "This here's a wild Mustang," Caleb said in a low, dramatic voice. "Fastest horse in all of Montana. Ain't nobody ever caught him." "What's his name?" "Don't got one yet. Wild things don't got names till somebody loves them enough to give them one." Rosie's face scrunched up in serious thought. "I think his name should be Storm, because we found him in a storm." "Storm." Caleb nodded slowly. "That's a fine name. A brave name." Clara pushed herself up on her elbows. Her body still ached, but the bone-deep exhaustion had faded. She felt almost human again. Caleb noticed her movement and set Rosie down gently. "Your mama's awake. Why don't you go show her Storm?" Rosie bounded across the cabin and climbed onto the bed, thrusting the wooden horse into Clara's face. "Look. Mama. Mr. Caleb made him just for me. He carved him with his own knife." Clara took the little horse, turning it over in her hands. The craftsmanship was crude but careful. Someone had taken time with this. Someone had wanted to make a child smile. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Mr. Caleb says I can help him feed the real horses today. Can I, Mama? Please?" Clara looked up at Caleb, who stood by the stove pouring coffee into a tin cup. He met her eyes briefly, then looked away. "We'll see how you feel after breakfast," Clara said. "You've been through a lot." "I feel fine. I feel better than fine." Rosie bounced on the bed. "Mr. Caleb made oatmeal with honey. Real honey, Mama. From actual bees." "Is that so?" "He's got 3 whole jars. He said I could have as much as I wanted." Clara raised an eyebrow at Caleb. "That's generous." "Got more than I need." He brought her the cup of coffee. "Drink this. You need to get your strength back." Their fingers brushed as she took the cup. Clara pulled away quickly, and if Caleb noticed, he didn't show it. "Thank you. There's oatmeal on the stove. Eat as much as you can stomach. You've been living on water and broth for 3 days." Clara sipped the coffee. It was strong and bitter, nothing like the weak tea she'd grown accustomed to in Boston. But it warmed her from the inside out, and she found herself draining the cup faster than she intended. "Easy," Caleb said. "Too much too fast, and you'll make yourself sick. I know how to take care of myself." "I don't doubt it, but knowing and doing ain't always the same thing." Clara bristled at that, but before she could respond, Rosie tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, can I go see the horses now? Please, Mr. Caleb says he's got a mare named Bessie, who's real gentle." "Rosie, I said we'll see." "But Mama." "Listen to your mother," Caleb said quietly. The words weren't harsh, but they carried weight. Rosie's protest died immediately. "Yes, sir." Clara watched the exchange with something close to wonder. Rosie had never responded to authority like that. Not from Edmund, who had used his fist to demand obedience. Not from Victor, who had used lawyers and threats. But this stranger said 4 words, and her daughter obeyed without question. "How do you do that?" Clara asked after Rosie had retreated to play with her wooden horse by the fire. "Do what?" "Make her listen. She doesn't listen to anyone." Caleb shrugged. "Kids don't listen to people they're scared of. They just pretend to. Real listening comes from respect, and respect comes from trust." He paused. That girl's been scared her whole life. She's tired of it. She wants someone she can trust instead of fear. Clara's throat tightened. You figured all that out in 3 days. I figured it out in 3 minutes. That child threw herself over your body in a blizzard and dared me to try and take you from her. That ain't fear. That's love. And love like that don't come from nowhere. It comes from a mama who taught her that protecting the people you love is worth dying for. Clara looked down at her hands. They were trembling. You don't know anything about us. I know enough. I know you've been running from something bad enough to risk your lives in a Montana winter. I know that little girl hasn't had a full night's sleep in months because she kept waking up these past few days to check that you were still breathing. I know you're scared of me, and you got every right to be because trusting strangers has probably cost you before. He met her eyes. But I also know that you ain't got anywhere else to go, and neither do I. So maybe we can stop circling each other like wounded animals and figure out how to survive this winter together. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the wind had finally stopped. The silence was almost louder than the storm had been. His name was Edmund, she said finally. My husband. He died 18 months ago. Caleb sat down slowly, giving her space. He was a merchant, very wealthy, very respected in Boston society. Everyone thought I was the luckiest woman alive. Clara's voice went flat. They didn't see what happened behind closed doors. They didn't hear Rosie crying in her room while I tried to explain why Papa hit Mama. They didn't see the bruises I covered with long sleeves and high collars. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. When Edmund died, I thought we were finally free. But then his brother Victor came. He said a woman like me wasn't fit to raise a child alone. He said Rosie should go to boarding school, where she could be properly educated. He said if I refused, he'd take her by force. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. Victor doesn't want Rosie. He wants her inheritance. Edmund left everything to her in his will with me as guardian. If Victor gets custody, he controls the money. And nobody would stop him. Victor is a lawyer. He knows every judge in Massachusetts. He knows how to make things happen and make them look legal. Clara laughed bitterly. I tried to fight. I hired my own lawyer. Victor got him disbarred within a month. I went to the police. Victor convinced them I was hysterical, grief-stricken, not in my right mind. Every door I knocked on, he was already there waiting to slam it in my face. So you ran. So I ran. I sold what jewelry I could hide and bought tickets west. I thought if I could just get far enough somewhere he couldn't reach, we'd be safe. Her voice cracked. But the money ran out in Kansas City. Then the winter came early. Then I got sick. She closed her eyes. If you hadn't found us, we'd both be dead right now. But I did find you, and you're not dead. Clara opened her eyes. Why, I've asked you before, and you gave me an answer about your wife and son. But that's not the whole truth, is it? Caleb was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. When Sarah and Thomas died, I wanted to die too. I had a gun and a bullet and a plan. I was going to do it that very night. He stared at the fire. But then a snowstorm hit, worst one I'd ever seen. I couldn't see 3 feet in front of my face, and I thought if I'm going to die, I ain't going to do it warm and comfortable. I'm going to walk out into that storm and let God decide. Clara held her breath. I walked for hours, couldn't feel my hands, couldn't feel my face, and then I heard crying. A calf maybe 2 days old, half frozen in a snowdrift. Its mother was dead beside it, and I had a choice. I could keep walking into the white and let the cold take me, or I could pick up that calf and carry it home. What did you do? I'm sitting here talking to you, ain't I? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. That calf lived, grew into the best breeding cow I ever had. And I figured if I could save something that small, that helpless, maybe there was still a reason to keep breathing. And when you found us in the storm, I thought maybe God was giving me another chance. Or maybe he was testing me. Either way, I wasn't going to fail. Caleb looked at her directly. I ain't trying to be your savior, Clara. I ain't trying to replace what you lost or fix what's broken. But I got a cabin and a fire and enough food to last the winter. If you want to stay, you can stay. No strings, no obligations. Just two people trying to survive." Clara studied his face. She'd spent years learning to read men to sense danger before it struck. She'd learned the hard way that kind words could hide cruel intentions, that gentle hands could turn violent in an instant. But she saw none of that in Caleb Thornton. She saw weariness. She saw grief. She saw a man who had walked into a storm expecting to die and found a reason to live instead. "What's the catch?" she asked. "No catch." "There's always a catch. Men always want something." Caleb stood up slowly. "I ain't most men. And what I want, you can't give me. I want my wife back. I want my son back. I want to go back 8 years and find a cure that didn't exist." He moved toward the door. "I'm gonna go check on the horses. You rest. Think about what I said. When you're ready to talk more, I'll be here." He pulled on his coat and opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of pine and snow. "Caleb." He paused, but didn't turn around. "Rosie can go see the horses, if you're willing to watch her." Now he turned. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but close. "I'd like that." So would she. He nodded once and stepped outside, closing the door softly behind him. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hands were still trembling, but not from weakness this time. From hope. And hope, she'd learned, was the most dangerous thing of all. 2 weeks passed and the world outside remained frozen solid. Clara grew stronger every day. She started taking over the cooking, insisting that it was the least she could do. Caleb didn't argue. He seemed relieved to have someone else in the kitchen, and Clara discovered that despite his many skills, the man could barely boil water without burning it. "How have you survived 8 years?" she asked one evening, scraping the charred remains of what had been his attempt at biscuits. Stubbornness mostly. And jerky. Lots of jerky. Rosie giggled from her spot by the fire. "Mr. Caleb's biscuits taste like rocks, Mama." "Rosie, that's not polite." "It's true, though." Caleb's eyes crinkled at the corners. "I ain't offended. My wife used to say the same thing. She said I could burn water if I put my mind to it." It was the first time he'd mentioned Sarah casually, without the shadow of grief darkening his features. Clara noticed, and something warm flickered in her chest. "Then it's a good thing I'm here," she said lightly. "Someone has to make sure you don't starve." "Yes, ma'am. A very good thing." Their eyes met across the table. Clara looked away first. The days fell into a rhythm. Mornings, Caleb would go out to tend the horses and cattle, and Rosie would beg to go with him, until Clara finally relented. Afternoons, Clara would work on mending clothes and organizing the cabin while Caleb chopped wood or repaired equipment. Evenings they'd eat together by the fire, and Caleb would carve, while Rosie practiced her letters on a slate Clara had found in the supply chest. "She's smart," Caleb said one night after Rosie had fallen asleep. "Picks things up faster than most kids twice her age. She gets it from her father." The words slipped out before Clara could stop them. She grimaced. "The intelligence, I mean, not the other things." "I figured." "I don't want you to think." Clara struggled for words. "Edmund wasn't always bad. When we first married, he was charming, generous. He made me feel like the most special woman in the world." She stared at the fire. "The first time he hit me, I was so shocked I convinced myself it was an accident. The second time he apologized so sweetly, I believed him when he said it would never happen again. By the third time, I was too ashamed to tell anyone. That ain't your fault. Isn't it?" I stayed. I kept staying. Even after Rosie was born. I told myself it was better for her to have a father, even a bad one, than no father at all. Clara's voice turned bitter. "I was a coward." "You were surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" Caleb set down his carving. "When I was in the war, I saw men do terrible things to stay alive. Things that would have made them sick in peacetime. But you can't judge a person by what they do when they're desperate. You judge them by what they do when they're free. I don't feel free, even now, even here. Victor. Clara nodded. He won't stop. I know him. He's patient, methodical. He'll search every corner of this country until he finds us. And when he does, he won't. You don't know that. I know that this cabin is 30 miles from the nearest town in territory that's barely on any map. I know that winter's got another 3 months left and nobody's traveling through these mountains until spring. And I know that if anyone comes looking for you, they'll have to go through me first. Clara looked at him. Why do you keep doing this? Putting yourself in danger for people you barely know. I told you, I'm tired of failing. That's not an answer. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because when I look at that little girl, I see Thomas. When I look at you, I see... He stopped himself. I see someone worth protecting, and I ain't gonna apologize for that. Clara's heart stuttered. Caleb, you don't gotta say anything. I ain't expecting anything. I just wanted you to know. He stood up abruptly. I'm gonna go check the barn. Make sure the horses are settled. He was out the door before she could respond. Clara sat alone by the dying fire, her thoughts racing. She told herself it was too soon. She told herself she couldn't trust her own judgment, not after Edmund. She told herself that getting attached would only make it harder when they eventually had to leave. But when she finally went to bed that night, she found herself listening for his footsteps on the porch. And when she heard the door open and close, heard him settle into his chair by the stove, she closed her eyes and smiled. The next morning, everything changed. Caleb had gone to check his trap lines, something he did once a week, to supplement their meat supply. Clara was teaching Rosie how to knead bread dough when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Rosie, go to the back room, now! Something in her mother's voice made Rosie obey without question. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and reached for the rifle above the mantel, just like Caleb had shown her. A knock at the door, heavy, insistent. Mrs. Millbrook, I know you're in there. My name is Martha Dawson. I own the general store in town. Caleb sent word that he might have visitors who needed supplies. Clara's grip on the rifle didn't waver. How do I know you're telling the truth? You don't. But I've known Caleb Thornton for 6 years, and he's never asked me for help before. Whatever he's got in there, he thinks it's worth protecting. And any friend of Caleb's is a friend of mine. Clara hesitated. Then slowly she unbolted the door and opened it a crack. The woman on the porch was somewhere past 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She carried a basket covered with a checkered cloth. Well, Martha said, looking Clara up and down. You're prettier than I expected. No wonder he's been acting strange. I beg your pardon. Never mind. Can I come in? It's colder than a banker's heart out here. Clara stepped aside, still holding the rifle. Martha entered the cabin and set her basket on the table, pulling back the cloth to reveal fresh eggs, a jar of preserves, and a small bundle wrapped in paper. Brought you some things. The eggs are from my chickens. The preserves are blackberry, made them myself last summer. And the package is peppermint sticks. Caleb mentioned there was a child. Martha looked around. Where is she? Hiding. She's been taught to be cautious around strangers. Smart girl. Martha settled into a chair without being invited. So, you want to tell me your story, or should I guess? Clara's jaw tightened. I don't know what Caleb told you. He didn't tell me anything. That man's more close-mouthed than a clam with lockjaw. But I've been running a general store in mining country for 20 years. I know when someone's running from something. Martha's eyes softened. I also know when someone's at the end of their rope. And honey, you've got that look. Clara's composure cracked. She set the rifle down and sank into the chair across from Martha. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I've been running for so long. I don't know how to stop. Then don't stop. But maybe you don't have to run alone anymore." "What do you mean?" Martha leaned forward. "This territory is full of people who came here to disappear. Minors who left debts back east. Women who left bad husbands. Men who left worse. We don't ask questions, and we don't answer them when strangers come looking." She paused. "But we also protect our own. And if Caleb Thornton has decided you're worth protecting, that means something in these parts." "You don't even know me." "I know Caleb. I know he hasn't let anyone past his front door since Sarah died. I know he's been walking around like a ghost for 8 years, and now suddenly he's riding into town asking about children's shoes and women's fabric." Martha smiled. "That man's coming back to life, and you're the reason why." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't deserve that. I bring trouble wherever I go." "Honey, trouble comes whether we deserve it or not. The question is whether we face it alone or together." Martha stood up. "I've got to get back before the weather turns. But I'll be back next week with more supplies. And if you ever need anything at all, you send word. Caleb knows how to find me." She was at the door when Clara called out, "Mrs. Dawson?" "Martha. Martha, why are you helping us?" Martha turned her hand on the doorframe. "Because 30 years ago, I was you. Running from a husband who would have killed me if I'd stayed. I made it to Montana with nothing but the clothes on my back and a prayer. A stranger took me in, fed me, gave me work. When I asked why, she said, 'Because someone did it for me once.'" Martha's eyes were bright. "Now I'm doing it for you. And someday you'll do it for someone else. That's how it works out here. That's how we survive." She left without another word. Clara stood at the window and watched her ride away, Martha's words echoing in her mind. That's how we survive. For the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to believe it might be true. When Caleb returned that evening laden with rabbits from his trapline, he found Clara standing at the stove stirring a pot of stew that smelled better than anything he'd eaten in years. "Martha came by," Clara said without turning around. "I know. I asked her to check on you while I was gone." Clara turned to face him. "You trust her?" "With my life. Have for years." She said, Clara hesitated. "She said you've been asking about children's shoes and women's fabric." Caleb's neck reddened slightly. "Rosie's boots are falling apart, and you've been wearing the same dress for 2 weeks. Figured you might need something that didn't come from my dead wife's trunk." Clara's breath caught. "You didn't have to do that." "I know I didn't have to. I wanted to." They stood there, the fire crackling between them, words hanging in the air that neither of them quite knew how to say. "Caleb. Mama." Rosie burst out of the back room holding up a peppermint stick. "Look what the lady brought. Can I have it, please?" The moment shattered, but not unpleasantly. Clara smiled and crouched down to her daughter's level. "After dinner, sweetheart. Not before." "Okay." Rosie skipped toward Caleb and wrapped her arms around his legs. "Mr. Caleb, Mama says I can have candy after dinner. Isn't that wonderful?" Caleb looked down at the child hugging him with such easy affection, then up at Clara, who was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's pretty wonderful." And for one perfect moment, standing in that small cabin with the snow falling softly outside, they felt like something they hadn't been in a very long time. They felt like a family. That feeling lasted exactly 17 days. Clara was hanging laundry on the line Caleb had strung inside the barn when she heard hoofbeats. Multiple horses moving fast. Her hands went still, a wet shirt dripping onto her boots. "Rosie," she called, keeping her voice steady. "Come here, sweetheart." Rosie looked up from where she'd been brushing Bessie's mane. "But Mama, I'm not finished." "Now." The girl heard the fear beneath the calm. She dropped the brush and ran to her mother's side. Caleb appeared in the barn doorway, rifle already in hand. His eyes met Clara's, and she saw her own terror reflected back. "Into the cabin," he said quietly. "Back room. Don't come out until I say." "Caleb. Go. Now." Clara grabbed Rosie's hand and ran. Behind her, she heard Caleb cock the rifle and step out into the yard. In the back room, Clara pressed Rosie against the wall and covered her daughter's mouth with her hand. "Not a sound," she breathed. "No matter what you hear, promise me." Rosie nodded, her eyes huge and wet. Through the thin cabin walls, Clara could hear voices, men's voices, and then cutting through them like a knife, one voice she knew better than her own heartbeat. "Victor." "Good afternoon." Victor's voice was smooth as silk and twice as slippery. "I'm looking for a woman and child who may have passed through this area. Perhaps you've seen them." "Can't say I have." Caleb's voice was flat, giving nothing away. "This is private property. You're trespassing." "My apologies. I'm Victor Millbrook, attorney at law. The woman I'm seeking is my sister-in-law, Clara Millbrook. She's been missing for several months, and I'm concerned for her welfare." "That's so?" "She's not well, you see. The death of my brother affected her deeply. I'm afraid she may have become unstable. She took her daughter and fled without telling anyone where she was going." Clara's nails dug into her palms so hard she drew blood. "Sounds like a family matter," Caleb said. "Nothing to do with me?" Of course. But a woman traveling alone with a small child in winter, you can understand my concern. If anything were to happen to them, I'd never forgive myself." "Like I said, haven't seen anyone." A long pause. Clara held her breath. "That's interesting," Victor said slowly. "Because the shopkeeper in town mentioned a rancher buying children's shoes just last week. Said he'd never done that before in 6 years. Clara's heart stopped. She must have been thinking of someone else. "Perhaps, but I think I'll have a look around if you don't mind." "I do mind." The click of a rifle being raised. "This is my land. You got no authority here." "I have authority granted by the Massachusetts courts. I have papers signed by a judge giving me custody of my niece. I have the legal right to search any property where I have reason to believe she's being held." "You're in Montana territory now. Massachusetts papers don't mean squat out here." Another pause, longer this time. "Mr. Thornton, that is your name, isn't it?" "Caleb Thornton." Victor's voice dropped lower. "I've done my research. I know about your wife and son. Tragic, truly tragic. I can only imagine how lonely it must be out here all by yourself. How tempting it might be to take in strays. You need to leave. I'm offering you a simple exchange. Give me the woman and child, and you'll never hear from me again. Keep them hidden, and I'll make your life very difficult. I have resources, Mr. Thornton. I have connections. I can have your land seized for unpaid taxes. I can have you arrested for kidnapping. I can make you disappear, and no one will ever ask questions." Silence. Clara pressed her hand harder over Rosie's mouth. The child was shaking. "Mr. Caleb said finally, his voice low and dangerous. "I buried my wife in the meadow behind this cabin. I buried my son beside her. I've killed men who deserved killing, and some who probably didn't. I've walked through blood and fire and come out the other side. And if you think you can threaten me on my own land, you're dumber than you look." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. You've got till I count to 5 to get on your horse and ride out of here. After that, I start shooting. 1. You wouldn't dare. 2. This is outrageous. I'll have the law. 3. Hoofbeats. Frantic retreating. Clara counted her own heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, 10, 20. The cabin door opened. "He's gone," Caleb said. "For now." Clara emerged from the back room on shaking legs, Rosie clinging to her skirt. "He found us. I don't know how, but he found us." "Martha." "He must have talked to someone who saw her heading this direction. Wasn't her fault. She didn't know." "It doesn't matter whose fault it is. He knows we're here. He'll be back." Clara's voice rose with panic. "We have to run, tonight. We'll take one of the horses. And go where? Caleb caught her shoulders firm but gentle. It's the dead of winter. The passes are blocked. You wouldn't make it 20 miles before you froze to death. Then what do we do? Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked down at Rosie, who was watching him with those two old eyes. I have an idea, he said slowly. But you're not gonna like it. Tell me. We get married. Clara stared at him like he'd grown a second head. What? Hear me out. Victor's claiming custody based on you being unfit. Single woman, no resources, mentally unstable. That's his story. But if you're married to a landowner with property and standing in the community, that story falls apart. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. As your husband, I'd have legal authority to speak on your behalf. Rosie would be my stepdaughter. Victor's Massachusetts papers wouldn't mean nothing against a Montana marriage certificate. But, Clara shook her head, you'd be tying yourself to us, to all of this. Victor won't stop just because of a piece of paper. I know, but it gives us standing. It gives us time. And it gives that little girl a father who'll fight for her. Rosie tugged at Clara's skirt. Mama, what's happening? Clara crouched down, smoothing her daughter's hair. Mr. Caleb is trying to help us, sweetheart. Is the bad man gonna take me away? No. Clara's voice was fierce. No one is taking you anywhere. Promise. Clara looked up at Caleb. He stood there, rifle still in hand, waiting. Not pushing, not demanding, just waiting. Promise, Clara said. She stood up slowly and faced him. If we do this, she said carefully, it's just for protection, just on paper. I'm not ready for... I ain't asking for anything you're not ready to give. I'm asking you to let me help. That's all. Clara studied his face. The same face she'd woken up to for nearly 3 weeks now. The same face that had carried her through a blizzard, nursed her through a fever, carved wooden horses to make her daughter smile. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for us? Caleb's jaw tightened. Because 8 years ago, I couldn't save the people I loved. And I swore to God that if he ever gave me another chance, I wouldn't waste it. He paused. This is my chance, Clara. Please let me take it. Clara felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't bother to wipe them away. Okay, she said softly. Okay. They were married 3 days later in Martha Dawson's back parlor. The ceremony was simple, witnessed by Martha and her husband Tom, a quiet man who'd lost an arm in the war and never talked about it. The preacher was an old circuit rider named Reverend Crane, who'd been passing through town and agreed to perform the service for a hot meal and a place to sleep. Clara wore a blue dress that Martha had lent her, altered to fit her smaller frame. Rosie wore a white ribbon in her hair and clutched her wooden horse throughout the ceremony. Do you, Caleb Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Clara Millbrook, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara looked at Caleb. His eyes were steady calm. There was no expectation in them, no demand, just quiet assurance. I do. Then by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Montana, I pronounce you man and wife. No kiss. They'd agreed on that beforehand. This was a legal arrangement, nothing more. But when Caleb slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his mother's ring he'd told her kept in a box these past 8 years, Clara felt something shift in her chest. Something that had nothing to do with legalities. Rosie bounced on her toes. Does this mean Mr. Caleb is my papa now? Clara opened her mouth to explain to qualify to manage expectations. But Caleb spoke first. Only if you want me to be, he said, crouching down to Rosie's level. I ain't trying to replace anyone, but I'd be honored to look after you and your mama, if you'll have me. Rosie considered this with all the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Then she threw her arms around his neck. I want you to be my papa, she said. My real papa was mean. You're nice." Caleb's arms closed around her, and Clara saw something break open in his face. 8 years of grief, of isolation, of walking through life like a ghost, all of it cracking apart in the embrace of a 5-year-old girl. "Then I guess I'm your papa now," he said hoarsely. "And I promise I will never ever be mean to you or your mama. You hear me?" "I hear you." "Good." Martha dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Tom cleared his throat and looked away. And Clara stood there, watching her daughter hold on to this man, like he was the answer to every prayer she'd never known how to pray, and felt her heart do something terrifying. It began to hope. The news of the wedding spread through town like wildfire. Most folks took it in stride. Caleb Thornton had always been an odd one, they said. Living out there alone all these years. Made sense he'd eventually find someone, even if the circumstances were peculiar. But not everyone was so accepting. "You hear about Thornton." Clara overheard a woman saying at Martha's store a week after the wedding. "Married some Eastern woman who showed up out of nowhere. They say she was running from something. Probably a criminal. Or worse." "I heard she was married before," another woman added. "Husband died under mysterious circumstances. Now she's sunk her claws into Caleb and his land. Poor man. He was always too soft-hearted for his own good." Clara's face burned. She set down the bolt of fabric she'd been examining and walked out without buying anything. That night she told Caleb what she'd heard. He listened without expression, then shrugged. "People talk. It's what they do when they ain't got enough real problems to worry about." "But they're saying horrible things. About me. About you. And does it change what's true?" Clara was quiet for a moment. "No." "Then let them talk. We know who we are. Rosie knows who we are. That's all that matters." It should have been enough. But the whispers followed Clara everywhere she went. At the general store, at the post office, at church, where the preacher's wife looked at her like she was tracking mud across a clean floor. "They hate me," Clara said one evening, staring into the fire. "They don't even know me, and they hate me." "They're scared," Caleb said from his chair where he was mending a harness. "You're new? You're different. You came from somewhere else and upset the order of things. Give them time." "What if time doesn't help?" "Then we make our own world right here. You, me, and Rosie. We don't need their approval to live." Clara looked at him. "Is that what you've been doing these past 8 years? Living without approval?" "I've been surviving. There's a difference." He set down the harness. "But lately I've been thinking, maybe surviving ain't enough. Maybe it's time to start living again." Their eyes met across the cabin. The fire crackled between them. "Caleb." A knock at the door shattered the moment. Caleb was on his feet, instantly rifle in hand. Clara pulled Rosie close. "Who's there?" "It's Martha." "Open up. We've got trouble." Caleb opened the door. Martha stood on the porch out of breath, her face pale in the lamplight. "He's back. Victor. He rode into town this afternoon with a federal marshal and papers from a judge in Helena." Clara's blood turned to ice. "What kind of papers?" "Custody order. Signed and sealed. He's claiming Clara's unfit to raise a child and that the marriage is a fraud designed to evade justice." Martha gripped Clara's hands. "He's coming here tomorrow morning, with the marshal, and if you can't prove otherwise, they're going to take Rosie." Rosie whimpered against Clara's side. "Mama, I don't want to go with the bad man." Clara looked at Caleb. He stood rigid, his jaw set, his eyes burning with cold fury. "Over my dead body," he said quietly. "That can be arranged." The voice came from outside, from the darkness beyond the porch. Victor Millbrook stepped into the light. He was exactly as Clara remembered. Tall, thin, impeccably dressed despite the mud on his boots. His face was handsome in a cold way, like a marble statue come to life. And his eyes? God, those eyes. Empty and calculating, like a snake sizing up its prey. "Good evening, Clara," he said smoothly. It's been a long time. Caleb raised the rifle. You weren't invited. Leave. I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, I have a federal marshal waiting just down the road. If I don't return in 10 minutes, he's been instructed to come up here with a posse. Victor smiled thinly. I thought we might talk first. Civilized people settling our differences. There's nothing to settle. Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. Rosie is my daughter. You have no claim to her. The courts disagree, as does the judge in Helena, who was most sympathetic to my concerns about your mental state. Victor's eyes flicked to Caleb. And your hasty marriage to a complete stranger certainly didn't help your case. That marriage is legal and binding. Perhaps, but a marriage conducted under duress solely to evade custody proceedings. That's fraud, Mr. Thornton. And fraud is a crime. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. Get off my land. Think carefully, Victor said. If you shoot me, you'll hang for murder. My marshal will see to that. And then who will protect your wife and stepdaughter? He spread his hands. I'm offering you a way out. Give me the child willingly, and I'll drop all charges. You can keep your land, keep your freedom, keep your wife. Everyone wins. Everyone except Rosie. Rosie will be well cared for. The finest schools, the best opportunities, everything a child could want. Except her mother. Victor's smile faltered. Her mother has proven herself incapable of providing proper care. The courts have agreed. This is simply the way it must be. Clara stepped forward, placing herself between Victor and her daughter. I know why you want her, she said quietly. It's not about custody. It's about Edmund's money. If you control Rosie, you control her inheritance. That's what this has always been about. Victor's mask slipped just for a moment. Something ugly flickered in his eyes. Be careful, Clara. Accusations like that could be considered slander. It's not slander if it's true. Silence fell over the porch. The wind picked up, sending snow swirling through the lamplight. Very well, Victor said finally. I gave you a chance. Remember that when this all falls apart. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Clara, I've contacted the newspapers back east. They're very interested in the story of a grieving widow who kidnapped her own child and fled across the country with a strange man. By the time I'm done, your name will be synonymous with scandal and shame. He walked into the darkness without looking back. Martha let out a shaky breath. That man is evil. He's desperate, Caleb said. Desperate men make mistakes. Clara sank into a chair, her legs no longer able to support her. Rosie climbed into her lap, burying her face in her mother's chest. What are we going to do? Clara whispered. He has the law on his side. He has money. He has power. We have nothing. Caleb set down the rifle and crouched beside her chair. We have each other, he said. We have this land. We have friends who believe in us. He took her hand in his. And we have the truth. Victor's built his case on lies. Lies can be exposed. How? I don't know yet, but we've got until morning to figure it out. He squeezed her hand. I made you a promise, Clara. I ain't gonna break it. Clara looked into his eyes. The same eyes that had found her in a blizzard. The same eyes that had watched over her daughter. The same eyes that had asked for nothing and given everything. I believe you, she said. And for the first time, she truly did. The night stretched on dark and endless. Clara put Rosie to bed in the back room, singing softly, until the child's eyes finally closed. Even in sleep, Rosie's hand clutched her wooden horse like a lifeline. In the main room, Caleb sat at the table with Martha and Tom, papers spread before them. The custody order is real, Martha said, studying the documents Victor had left behind. But look here, it's based on testimony from a physician in Boston who claims Clara is mentally unstable. Anyone know this doctor? Clara shook her head. I've never heard the name before. Victor must have paid him. Can we prove that? How we're 2,000 miles from Boston. We have no witnesses, no resources. We have something better, Tom said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken all evening. Everyone turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Caleb asked. "We have the community." Tom leaned forward, his weathered face serious. "Victor's playing a legal game. But out here, law ain't the only thing that matters. Reputation matters. Character matters. If the folks in this town stand up and say Clara's a good mother, that Caleb's a good man, that this marriage is real, that carries weight. Even with a federal marshal." "But the people in town don't trust me," Clara said. "They've been whispering behind my back for weeks." "Some of them have," Martha agreed. "But not all. And the ones who matter, the ones whose opinions the marshal will take seriously, they haven't made up their minds yet. We just need to give them a reason to stand with us." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "The Reverend," he said finally. "Reverend Crane. He married us. He can testify that the ceremony was genuine." "And the doctor," Martha added. "Old Doc Perkins has known Caleb for years. He could examine Clara, declare her sound of mind. That would counter Victor's physician." "What about character witnesses?" Tom asked. "People who can speak to Clara's fitness as a mother." "I can," Martha said firmly. "I've seen her with that child. The love between them is real. Anyone with eyes can see it." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You'd do that? After everything people have been saying? Honey, I told you. 30 years ago I was in your shoes. Someone stood up for me when I had no one. Now it's my turn." Martha reached across the table and squeezed Clara's hand. "We're not going to let that snake take your daughter. Not without a fight." For the first time that night, Clara felt something other than despair. She felt the stirrings of hope. Dawn came too soon. Clara hadn't slept. She'd spent the night watching Rosie breathe, memorizing every detail of her daughter's face. The curve of her cheek, the sweep of her lashes, the way her lips moved slightly in her dreams. If this was the last night they had together, she wanted to remember every second. The sound of hooves broke the morning silence. Caleb appeared in the doorway of the back room. "They're here." Clara gathered Rosie in her arms and walked out to face whatever was coming. Victor stood in the yard with a man in a federal marshal's uniform. Behind them, 2 more men on horseback, hands resting near their weapons. But they weren't alone. Martha was there, standing on the porch with her arms crossed. Tom stood beside her, his one good hand resting on a rifle. Behind them, Clara saw other faces, the blacksmith and his wife. The preacher's wife looking uncertain but present. Old Doc Perkins with his medical bag. A dozen townspeople, maybe more, gathered in the cold morning air. "What is this?" Victor demanded. "This is a community," Martha said calmly. "Standing up for one of our own." Victor's face contorted with rage. "Clara Millbrook is not one of your own. She's a fugitive, a kidnapper, a mentally unstable woman who—" "Her name," Caleb said, stepping forward, "is Clara Thornton. She's my wife, and if you call her those things again, I'll knock every tooth out of your head." The marshal stepped between them. "Everyone calm down. I'm here to execute a lawful custody order, not start a war." "With respect, Marshal," Doc Perkins said, moving forward. "I examined Mrs. Thornton yesterday. She's as sound of mind as anyone I've ever met. More so than most. Whatever physician signed that order either never met her or was paid to lie." "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious situation, and I'm prepared to testify to her mental fitness in any court in this territory." Victor's face was turning red. "This is absurd. These people are obviously colluding." "We're telling the truth," Martha interrupted, "which is more than you've done since you arrived. Everyone in this town knows what you really want. You don't care about that child. You care about money." Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. The marshal's eyes narrowed. "Is there any evidence to support that claim?" "I have letters," Clara said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "Letters from my husband. He wrote to me before he died, warning me about Victor. He said his brother had been stealing from the business for years. He said if anything happened to him, I should take Rosie and run." "Where are these letters?" Sewn into the lining of my coat. I've carried them since I left Boston." Victor went pale. "She's lying. There are no letters." "Then you won't mind if the marshal examines them?" Clara handed Rosie to Caleb and walked into the cabin. When she returned, she carried a small bundle of papers creased and worn from their long journey. The marshal took them and read in silence. His expression didn't change, but when he looked up at Victor, there was something cold in his eyes. "These letters paint a very different picture than the one you presented, Mr. Millbrook. They're forgeries. She must have... They're in your brother's handwriting. I assume we can verify that easily enough." The marshal folded the letters and tucked them into his coat. "I think we need to take this matter back to Helena for further investigation. Until then, the custody order is suspended." "You can't do that." "I just did." The marshal turned to Clara. "Mrs. Thornton, I apologize for the intrusion. It seems I was given incomplete information about this case." Victor lunged forward, his composure finally shattering. "You can't believe her. She's a liar, a thief. I'll have your badge for this." The marshal's hand dropped to his pistol. "Mr. Millbrook, I strongly suggest you calm down." "I won't calm down. That child belongs to me. Her inheritance belongs to me. I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much." He realized what he'd said a moment too late. The crowd went silent. The marshal's eyebrows rose. "Well," he said quietly, "that's quite an admission." Victor's face crumbled. He looked around at the gathered townspeople, at the marshal, at Clara, standing with her daughter in her husband's arms. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I'll find another way. You'll leave this territory," the marshal said flatly, "today. And if I ever see you in Montana again, I'll arrest you for attempted fraud and perjury. Do I make myself clear?" Victor opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then, without another word, he turned and walked to his horse. He mounted stiffly and rode away without looking back. Clara watched him go. Her legs were shaking, her heart was pounding, but she was still standing, and Rosie was still in her arms. Caleb's hand found hers. She gripped it tight. "Is it over?" Rosie whispered. "Is the bad man gone?" Clara looked at the marshal, who nodded slightly. "Yes, baby," she said, her voice breaking. "The bad man is gone." Rosie threw her arms around Clara's neck. "I knew it. I knew Mr. Caleb would save us. I knew it." Clara held her daughter close and finally let herself cry. Around them, the townspeople began to disperse, some nodding at Clara as they passed, others stopping to shake Caleb's hand. Martha was crying openly. Tom wiped his eyes with his sleeve, and somewhere in the distance, a bird sang the first bird Clara had heard since the winter began. Spring was coming. The days that followed Victor's departure moved slowly, like a river finally freed from ice. Clara found herself waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every time hoofbeats sounded on the road, her heart seized. Every stranger who passed through town made her hands tremble. She'd spent so long running that she'd forgotten how to stand still. "You're wearing a hole in the floor," Caleb said one evening, watching her pace by the window. "I can't help it. What if he comes back? What if he finds another judge, another marshal? Then we'll fight him again. And if we lose..." Caleb set down the harness he'd been mending and walked to her. He stood close, not touching, but near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Clara, look at me." She turned. His eyes were steady calm. "Victor's gone. The marshal made that clear. And even if he weren't, even if he came back with an army, I wouldn't let him take Rosie. I wouldn't let him take you." He paused. "You believe me, don't you?" Clara studied his face, the strong jaw, the weathered lines around his eyes, the mouth that rarely smiled, but when it did, transformed his entire expression. "I believe you," she said softly. "I just don't know how to stop being afraid. You don't have to stop. Fear keeps us sharp, but you can't let it run your life." He reached up, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're safe here, Clara. You and Rosie both. I need you to believe that." His touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with cold. "I'm trying," she whispered. "That's all I ask." They stood there for a long moment, close enough to touch neither of them moving. The fire crackled. Outside, wind rattled the shutters. "Mama, Papa!" Rosie's voice broke the spell. She came running from the back room waving a piece of paper. "Look what I made." Caleb stepped back, clearing his throat. Clara felt her cheeks flush. "What is it, sweetheart?" Rosie held up her drawing proudly. It was rough the way children's drawings always were, but the subject was clear: 3 figures standing in front of a cabin. A tall man with brown hair, a woman in a blue dress, and a little girl between them holding both their hands. "It's us," Rosie said. "Our family." Clara's throat tightened. She crouched down and pulled Rosie into her arms. "It's beautiful, baby. I'm gonna hang it on the wall, right there by the fire, where everyone can see it." Rosie squirmed free and ran to claim her spot. Clara watched her go, then looked up at Caleb. He was staring at the drawing with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Caleb, she called me Papa. She's been doing that for weeks. I know, but I don't think I'll ever get used to it." His voice was rough. "I never thought I'd hear that word again. After Thomas." Clara stood and placed her hand on his arm. "You deserve to hear it. You've earned it." He looked at her, and for just a moment, his careful mask slipped. She saw the grief beneath it, the longing, the hope he'd been afraid to feel. "Clara, Mama, Papa, come help me hang it." The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, some invisible barrier crumbling just a little more. They went to help Rosie hang her drawing, and for the first time, the cabin felt like home. Spring arrived in fits and starts, warm days, followed by sudden snowstorms, as if the winter couldn't quite let go. Clara understood the feeling. She threw herself into work, helping Caleb with the ranch in ways she'd never imagined. She learned to feed the horses, mend fences, gather eggs from the small chicken coop Martha had helped her build. Her hands grew rough and calloused, her skin tanned by the sun. "You're a natural," Caleb said one afternoon, watching her gentle a skittish mare. "I had a good teacher." "I didn't teach you that. That's instinct. You've got a gift with animals." Clara stroked the mare's nose, smiling. "Edmund never let me near horses. He said ladies didn't belong in stables." Edmund was a fool. Yes, he was. She said it simply, without bitterness. The wounds Edmund had left were still there, but they were healing. Slowly, day by day, she was becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone who might be capable of love again. The thought terrified her. Martha noticed the change during one of her weekly visits. "You're looking well?" she said, eyeing Clara over her cup of tea. "Got some color in your cheeks, some light in your eyes. The fresh air agrees with me." "Mm-hmm. And I suppose Caleb Thornton has nothing to do with it." Clara nearly choked on her tea. "Martha." "Don't Martha me, I've got eyes. I've seen the way you look at each other when you think no one's watching." Martha leaned forward. "It's nothing to be ashamed of, honey. He's a good man. And you deserve some happiness after everything you've been through. We married for protection. It was a business arrangement. Maybe it started that way. But that's not what it is now, and you know it." Clara set down her cup. Her hands were trembling slightly. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Edmund. He was charming too at first. He made me feel special, safe. And then, Caleb isn't Edmund. I know that. In my head I know that. But my heart—" She pressed a hand to her chest. "My heart remembers what it felt like to trust and be betrayed. I don't know if I can survive that again." Martha reached across the table and took Clara's hands. "Let me tell you something about Caleb Thornton. When Sarah died, he shut down. Completely. For months he didn't speak to anyone. Didn't come to town. People thought he'd died too, up there on that mountain." Martha's voice softened. "Then one day he rode in looking like death warmed over, and he asked me if I knew anyone who needed help. said he couldn't sit in that cabin anymore, staring at the walls thinking about what he'd lost. He needed to do something. Anything. What did you do? I gave him a job. Odd work around the store. Fixing things, hauling supplies. It wasn't much, but it gave him a reason to keep going. Martha smiled. He's been doing that ever since, finding reasons to keep going. And now he's found the best reason of all. What do you mean? You, honey. You and Rosie. That man has come back to life since you arrived. Everyone in town can see it. The question is whether you're brave enough to let him love you. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I want to be, she whispered. I want to so badly. Then stop fighting it. Open your heart and let him in. Martha squeezed her hands. You've been running for so long. It's time to stand still and let yourself be found. That night, after Rosie was asleep, Clara found Caleb sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. Mind if I join you? He shifted to make room on the step. It's your porch, too. She sat beside him close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The night was cool, but not cold, the first truly spring-like evening they'd had. What are you thinking about? She asked. Sarah, Thomas. He paused. You. Me. I was remembering the night I found you. When I heard Rosie screaming in that storm, my first thought was to keep riding, to pretend I hadn't heard. I was so tired of carrying grief I didn't think I could bear any more. What changed your mind? I don't know. Maybe God. Maybe fate. Maybe just the sound of a child crying for her mother. He turned to look at her. But whatever it was, I'm grateful. Because finding you was the first thing that's made sense in 8 years. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Caleb, I need to tell you something. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She took a deep breath. When we got married, I told myself it was just for protection, just a piece of paper to keep Rosie safe. I told myself I'd never let myself feel anything more than gratitude. And now, she turned to face him fully. Now I can't stop thinking about you. When you smile at Rosie, my heart aches. When you look at me, I forget how to breathe. When you touch me, even by accident, I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, terrified and exhilarated all at once. Caleb was very still. Clara. I'm scared. She continued, the words tumbling out now. I'm so scared of feeling this way. Edmund taught me that love could be a trap, that tenderness could turn to cruelty in an instant. I swore I'd never let anyone have that power over me again. I would never hurt you. I know you wouldn't. But knowing and feeling are different things. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers trembling against his cheek. I'm asking you to be patient with me. I'm asking you to give me time to learn how to trust again. Can you do that? Caleb's hand came up to cover hers. His eyes were bright in the starlight. Clara, I've been waiting 8 years for a reason to live. I can wait a little longer for you to be ready to live with me. He turned his head and pressed a kiss to her palm. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Clara's tears spilled over. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. Thank you, she breathed. They sat like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breath mingling in the cool night air. Not kissing, not rushing, just being. It was the most intimate thing Clara had ever experienced. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Clara stopped holding herself apart. She let herself laugh at Caleb's dry humor. She let herself lean against him when they sat by the fire at night. She let herself reach for his hand when they walked to the barn together. And Caleb, patient and steady, as always, never pushed for more than she was ready to give. Papa, watch me, Rosie called from the corral where she was practicing her riding on Bessie. I'm going fast. Not too fast, Clara called back, but she was smiling. Caleb stood beside her, one boot propped on the fence rail. She's a natural, better than most kids twice her age. She gets that from you. I ain't taught her nothing she didn't already have in her. Clara watched her daughter circle the corral, her face alight with joy. In Boston, Rosie had been a shadow child, quiet and fearful, flinching at loud noises and sudden movements. Now she was blooming, growing stronger and braver every day. "You gave her that," Clara said softly. "That confidence, that joy." "I just gave her a safe place to grow. She did the rest." Clara turned to look at him. "You always do that. Deflect praise. Act like you haven't done anything special." "I haven't." "You have. You saved our lives, Caleb. Not just in that blizzard, but every day since. You gave us a home when we had none. You stood between us and Victor when anyone else would have turned us over. You became a father to a child who had every reason to fear men." Her voice broke. "You made us a family." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Clara." "I'm not finished." She took his hand and held it tight. "I've been scared for so long. Scared of trusting, scared of loving, scared of hoping for something good because every time I hoped before I was disappointed." She stepped closer. "But I'm not scared anymore. Not of you. Not of this." "What are you saying?" Clara looked into his eyes, those steady, patient eyes that had watched over her for months without asking for anything in return. "I'm saying that I love you, Caleb Thornton. Not because of gratitude, not because of protection, because of who you are, because of how you treat my daughter, because of how you make me feel." She raised up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. "I love you." The kiss was soft, tentative, a question rather than a demand. Caleb went perfectly still for one heartbeat. 2. Then his arms came around her, and he kissed her back with 8 years of loneliness and longing in every touch. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I love you too," Caleb said hoarsely. "I've loved you since the moment I saw you lying in that snow, fighting to live for your daughter. I just didn't think I had the right to say it." "You have the right. You have every right." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Clara felt something inside her finally let go. "Mama, Papa, are you kissing?" They broke apart to find Rosie staring at them from atop Bessie, her face split in a huge grin. "Maybe," Clara said, laughing through her tears. "That means you really love each other, like in the stories." "Yes, sweetheart, like in the stories." Rosie bounced in the saddle. "Does this mean we're a real family now, forever and ever?" Caleb looked at Clara. Clara looked at Caleb. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Forever and ever." Rosie whooped with joy and urged Bessie into a trot around the corral, singing a made-up song about mamas and papas and love. Clara leaned into Caleb's chest, his arms wrapped around her, watching their daughter celebrate. "Is this real?" she whispered. "Sometimes I think I'm going to wake up and find myself back in that blizzard dying in the snow. It's real." Caleb pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And I'm going to spend every day making sure you never doubt it." Word of the kiss spread through town faster than wildfire. Martha showed up the next day with a bottle of wine and a knowing smile. "About time," was all she said. The preacher's wife, who had once looked at Clara like dirt on her shoe, stopped by with a pie and a stammered apology for being unwelcoming. Clara accepted both with grace. Even old Doc Perkins made a special trip to shake Caleb's hand and tell him he was the luckiest man in Montana. "Seems like everyone's got an opinion," Clara said after the latest visitor departed. "That's small towns for you. No such thing as privacy." "Does it bother you?" "Nope." Caleb pulled her close. "Let them talk. I've got nothing to hide." That night they sat together on the porch watching the stars come out one by one. Rosie was asleep inside, clutching her wooden horse, peaceful and content. "I've been thinking," Clara said. "Dangerous habit." She swatted his arm. "I'm serious. I've been thinking about what comes next. For us. For Rosie. For this family we're building. And I want to make something of this place. Not just survive, but thrive. Martha mentioned that the town needs a midwife, a healer, someone who knows herbs and medicine. Clara sat up straighter. I could do that. I have the knowledge. I just need the opportunity. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You'd be good at it. You think so? I know so. You've got a gift for taking care of people. I've seen it with Rosie, with the animals. Even with me, though, God knows I didn't make it easy. He smiled. If that's what you want, I'll help you make it happen. Really? Clara, I'd move mountains for you. Building a little healing practice is nothing. She kissed him soft and sweet. I love you. I know, I'm very lovable. She laughed and kissed him again. The next morning, Clara rode into town with a list of supplies and a heart full of purpose. Martha helped her stock a small room in the back of the general store with herbs and bandages and tinctures. Word spread quickly. Clara Thornton was offering healing services, reasonable rates, all welcome. Her first patient was a miner with a badly infected cut. Clara cleaned the wound, applied a poultice, and sent him home with instructions for care. He paid her in fresh-caught trout and gratitude. Her second patient was a pregnant woman, frightened and alone, whose husband was working a claim 50 miles away. Clara held her hand through 14 hours of labor and delivered a healthy baby boy. The woman named him Caleb, after the man who'd given Clara a chance at a new life. Her third patient was the preacher's wife, who arrived with a mysterious rash and left with medicine and an invitation to tea. You're becoming quite popular, Caleb observed one evening as Clara counted her earnings. People need help. I'm glad I can give it. You're more than giving help. You're giving hope. He kissed her forehead. I'm proud of you. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Edmund had never said those words to her. Not once in 5 years of marriage. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For believing in me. For letting me be more than someone who needs saving. Caleb cupped her face in his hands. Clara, you've never been someone who needs saving. From the moment I met you, you were fighting. Fighting for Rosie. Fighting for survival. Fighting for a future. He smiled. All I did was give you a place to stand. You gave me so much more than that. Maybe. But the strength was always yours. Don't ever forget that. She wouldn't. She couldn't. Because for the first time in her life, Clara Thornton knew exactly who she was. Not Edmund's victim, not Victor's prey, not a woman defined by the men who had tried to control her. She was a mother, a healer, a wife, a survivor. And she was finally, gloriously free. Summer came in a blaze of green and gold. Clara planted a garden behind the cabin, filling it with herbs for her practice and vegetables for the table. Rosie helped her small hands learning to coax life from the soil. Caleb expanded the corral and brought in 2 new horses, building a breeding program that would sustain them for years to come. And every night they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains, marveling at the life they'd built from nothing. Mama, Rosie said one evening, climbing into Clara's lap. Yes, sweetheart. Remember when we were running? When we were scared all the time? I remember. I'm not scared anymore. Rosie snuggled closer. Papa makes me feel safe, and you make me feel loved, and that's all I need. Clara held her daughter tight, tears streaming down her cheeks. That's all any of us need, baby. Caleb's hand found hers in the fading light, and in that moment, surrounded by everything she'd never dared to dream of, Clara knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Home. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in late August, carried by a dusty rider who had traveled 3 weeks from Boston. Clara was kneading bread when she heard the hoofbeats. Her hands went still, old instincts flaring, but she forced herself to breathe. Those days were behind her. Victor was gone. She was safe. Still, when Caleb came through the door with an envelope in his hand and a strange expression on his face, her heart stuttered. What is it? Letter. From Massachusetts. He held it out to her. It's addressed to you." Clara wiped the flour from her hands and took the envelope. The return address was a law office in Boston, one she didn't recognize. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. She read in silence. Once. Twice. A third time, because the words refused to make sense. "Clara, what does it say?" She looked up at him, her face pale. "Victor is dead." Caleb went very still. "How?" "Carriage accident. 2 weeks ago. He was drunk apparently. Lost control crossing a bridge." Clara's voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "The letter is from his creditors. It seems Victor had been embezzling from the family business for years. When Edmund died, Victor used his position to cover his tracks. But with Victor gone, the truth came out." "What does that mean for Rosie's inheritance?" Clara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. "It means everything Edmund left her is still there, untouched. Victor never got his hands on it." She laughed a strange, brittle sound. "All that running, all that fear. And he died in a ditch drunk on stolen money." Caleb crossed the room and took her in his arms. She collapsed against his chest, the letter crumpling between them. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." "It's been over for a while, Clara. This is just the proof." She pulled back to look at him. "What do we do now?" "The inheritance. The legal matters, the property in Boston. We do whatever you want. If you want to go back east, settle things in person, I'll go with you. If you want to stay here and let lawyers handle it, we'll do that. It's your choice." "I don't want to go back. I never want to see Boston again." "Then we stay. But Rosie's inheritance can be managed from here. We'll hire a good lawyer, someone who can be trusted. Martha knows people." Caleb cupped her face in his hands. "Clara, listen to me. Money is just money. It doesn't change who we are or what we've built. Rosie's real inheritance is right here, this land, this family, this life we've made together. The rest is just numbers on paper." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "I don't. I just tell you the truth and hope for the best." She kissed him then, deep and fierce, pouring all her relief and gratitude and love into it. When they finally broke apart, she was smiling. "I love you, Caleb Thornton." "I love you too, Clara Thornton," he grinned. "Now finish that bread before it overrises. I'm hungry." She laughed and swatted his arm, and just like that, the shadow of Victor Millbrook finally lifted from their lives. The news spread through town within days. Clara Thornton was no longer a fugitive. Her daughter's inheritance was secure. The villain who had pursued them across the country was dead and disgraced. The same townspeople who had once whispered behind Clara's back now lined up to shake her hand and offer congratulations. The preacher's wife hosted a celebration at the church. Old Doc Perkins declared it was the best news he'd heard in 20 years. "Funny how people change their tune when they find out you've got money," Clara observed wryly. "People are people," Martha said. "They follow the wind. The question is whether you let it bother you." "It used to. Now." Clara looked around the church hall, at the neighbors who had stood with her against Victor, at the community that had slowly become her own. "Now I understand that most folks are doing the best they can with what they've got. Same as me. That's wisdom talking. That's exhaustion talking. I'm too tired to hold grudges." Martha laughed and pulled her into a hug. "You've come a long way, honey. I'm proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you." "Sure you could have. You're stronger than you know." Martha held her at arm's length. "But I'm glad I got to be part of it." Across the room, Caleb stood with Tom and the blacksmith, discussing something that involved a lot of hand gestures and occasional laughter. Rosie darted between the adults playing tag with the other children, her laughter ringing through the hall. Clara watched them, her heart so full it ached. This was her life now. Not the life she'd planned, not the life she'd imagined during those dark years in Boston, but something better. Something real. Something worth fighting for. Fall arrived with a blaze of color and a bite of cold. Clara's healing practice had grown beyond what she could manage alone. She took on an apprentice, a young widow named Sarah, who had lost her husband to a mining accident and needed work to support her children. Together they served the growing community, treating everything from broken bones to difficult pregnancies. "You're building something important here," Caleb said one evening, watching Clara prepare her medical bag for a house call. "I'm just helping people." "That's what makes it important." She paused and looked at him. "Do you ever regret it? Taking us in your quiet life is gone. There's always someone at the door, always some emergency. My quiet life was killing me. I just didn't know it." He pulled her close. "You woke me up, Clara, you and Rosie. Before you came, I was just waiting to die. Now I've got something to live for. That's a lot of pressure to put on a woman. You can handle it." She smiled and kissed his cheek. "I'll be back before dark. I'll have dinner waiting." As Clara rode toward her patient's homestead, she thought about how much had changed in less than a year. This time last winter, she'd been dying in a snowstorm, her daughter screaming beside her. Hope nothing but a distant memory. Now, she had a husband who loved her, a daughter who was thriving, a community that respected her, work that mattered. She had everything she'd never dared to dream of, and she was grateful for every single moment. The first snow of winter came in early November. Clara woke to find the world blanketed in white, the cabin warm and quiet around her. Caleb's side of the bed was empty, but she could hear him moving in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of coffee being made and the stove being stoked. She lay still for a moment, watching the snow fall through the frosted window. A year ago, snow had nearly killed her. Now it felt like a blessing, a soft white blanket wrapping the world in peace. "Mama!" "It's snowing." Rosie burst through the door and launched herself onto the bed. "Can we build a snowman? Please, please, please. After breakfast, and after you put on your warm clothes." "I already put them on, Papa helped me." Clara laughed and pulled her daughter close. "Then I guess we're building a snowman." They spent the morning in the yard rolling snowballs and stacking them high. Caleb contributed a carrot for the nose and 2 pieces of coal for eyes. Rosie insisted on adding her red scarf, even though Clara warned her she'd regret it when she got cold. "I don't care," Rosie said firmly. "Mr. Snowman needs to be warm too." "Mr. Snowman is made of snow. He's already cold." "That's why he needs the scarf even more." There was no arguing with that logic. When the snowman was complete, they stood back to admire their work. It was lopsided and lumpy, with a crooked smile and arms made of sticks that pointed in different directions. It was perfect. "We should name him," Rosie announced. "What do you want to call him?" Rosie thought hard, her face scrunched up in concentration. "Hope," she said finally. "Because he makes me feel hopeful." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "That's a beautiful name, sweetheart." "I know." Rosie took both their hands, standing between them. "Mama, Papa, can we do this every year? Build a snowman together as a family." Caleb and Clara looked at each other over their daughter's head. "Every year," Caleb promised. "As long as we live." "And even after that," Clara added, "because some traditions never die." Rosie beamed and began chattering about all the things they could add to next year's snowman, already planning a future she finally believed in. Clara squeezed Caleb's hand. He squeezed back, and the snow continued to fall, soft and silent, blessing them all. Winter deepened, but the cabin stayed warm. Clara continued her healing work, riding out to homesteads and farms, even in the worst weather. She delivered 3 babies that winter, each one a miracle of new life in the frozen landscape. Caleb worked the ranch with quiet efficiency, tending to the horses and cattle, making repairs, planning for spring. He'd taken on a hand to help with the heavy work a former soldier named James, who had lost a leg at Gettysburg and needed a second chance. "You've got a soft heart," Clara teased him one evening. "I've got a practical heart. James is a hard worker, and I needed help." He paused. "But yeah, maybe a little soft too." "I like your soft heart." "Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation to maintain." The holidays came, and with them, joy Clara had never expected to feel again. Martha organized a Christmas gathering at the general store with food and music and dancing. Clara wore a new dress, green velvet, that Caleb had ordered from Denver as a surprise. Rosie wore a matching ribbon in her hair and danced until she fell asleep in Caleb's arms. "Happy?" Caleb asked, carrying their sleeping daughter home through the snow. "More than I ever thought possible." "Good. That's all I wanted." On Christmas morning, they exchanged gifts by the fire. Caleb gave Clara a leather-bound journal for recording her medical notes. Clara gave Caleb a new pocket watch engraved with their initials intertwined. Rosie gave them both drawings she'd made in secret, carefully wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "This one's Papa teaching me to ride," she explained, pointing to a picture of stick figures on horses. "And this one's Mama making medicine. And this one's all of us together in front of our house." Clara held the drawings like they were made of gold. "They're perfect, sweetheart." "I know," Rosie grinned. "I'm a really good artist." "The best," Caleb agreed solemnly. After Rosie had been put to bed, Clara and Caleb sat together by the dying fire, the cabin quiet around them. "I have one more gift for you," Clara said softly. "You've already given me more than I deserve. This is different." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I saw Doc Perkins last week. He confirmed it." Caleb went very still. "Clara, are you saying—" "We're having a baby, sometime in late spring, he thinks." For a long moment Caleb didn't move, didn't speak, didn't seem to breathe. Then his face crumpled, and he pulled her into his arms with a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy? Happy?" He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with tears. "Clara, I thought I'd never be a father again. I thought that part of my life was over. And now—" He couldn't finish. He just shook his head, overwhelmed. "Now we get to start a new chapter," Clara said, tears streaming down her own cheeks. "Together." Together. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you. I love you so much. I love you too. Always." They held each other in the firelight, two broken people who had somehow made each other whole, marveling at the miracle of new life growing between them. Outside, the snow fell softly, blanketing the world in white. Inside, the fire burned warm and bright. And hope, fragile and fierce, bloomed in the darkness like a flower in winter. Spring came early that year, as if the world itself was eager for new beginnings. Clara's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body growing round and healthy under Doc Perkins' watchful care. Rosie was beside herself with excitement, alternating between planning all the things she would teach her new sibling and worrying that she wouldn't be the baby anymore. "You'll always be my first baby," Clara assured her. "Nothing will ever change that. Promise. Promise." Caleb built a cradle from oak he'd been seasoning for years, carving intricate designs into the headboard horses and flowers and stars. He worked on it every evening after dinner, his hands moving with careful precision. "It's beautiful," Clara said, watching him sand the edges smooth. "It's for our family. It should be beautiful. You're going to be a wonderful father." "I'm going to try. That's all anyone can do." Martha threw a baby shower at the general store, gathering women from all over the territory to celebrate. They brought gifts of blankets and clothes, herbs and remedies, wisdom and well-wishes. Clara sat in the center of it all, surrounded by women who had become her friends, her community, her family. "Look at you," Martha said, squeezing her hand. "The frightened woman who stumbled into my store a year ago is gone. In her place is someone strong and sure and loved. I couldn't have done it without you. You could have. You just didn't have to." Martha smiled. That's what community is for. We carry each other when the load gets too heavy. Clara thought about all the people who had carried her: Caleb, Martha, Tom, the townspeople who had stood with her against Victor. She thought about all the people she was now carrying, in turn her patients, her apprentice, the women who came to her for healing and hope. This was what it meant to belong, not just to a place, but to a people, not just to survive, but to thrive together. Thank you, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. Thank me by being happy, Martha replied. That's all I've ever wanted for you. The baby came on a warm night in May. Clara's labor started just after sunset, gentle contractions that grew stronger as the hours passed. Caleb sent James to fetch Martha and Doc Perkins, then settled in beside Clara, holding her hand through every pain. You're doing great, he said, his voice steady, even as his face betrayed his worry. Easy for you to say. You're not the one pushing a watermelon through a keyhole. Despite the pain, she managed a weak laugh. So did he. Rosie had been sent to Martha's house for the night, but she'd left a drawing under Clara's pillow, a picture of a baby surrounded by hearts with the words, "Welcome new baby," scrawled in crayon. Clara held on to that drawing like a talisman through the long hours of labor. Near dawn, with Martha coaching and Doc Perkins standing by, Clara gave one final push and brought her second child into the world. It's a boy, Martha announced, tears streaming down her face. A beautiful, healthy boy. They placed him in Clara's arms, this tiny, perfect creature, with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. He wailed once loudly, then settled against her chest with a sigh. Caleb leaned over them both, his face wet with tears. Hello, son, he whispered. Welcome to the world. What should we name him? Clara asked. Caleb was quiet for a moment, looking at the baby, then at her. Thomas, he said finally, after the son I lost, if that's all right with you. Clara's heart swelled with love. Thomas Thornton. It's perfect. Thomas Edmund Thornton, Caleb corrected gently, after your brother-in-law, the one who tried to protect you even from beyond the grave. Clara's tears fell onto the baby's blanket. Yes, she breathed. Thomas Edmund Thornton. Later that morning, Rosie came bursting through the door, unable to wait another moment. Where is he? Where's the baby? Can I see him? Can I hold him? Clara guided her to the bedside, where little Thomas lay sleeping in his new cradle. This is your brother, Clara said. Thomas, can you say hello? Rosie peered into the cradle with wide eyes. He's so tiny, and wrinkly, and kind of red. All babies look like that at first. You did too. I did not. You did. I have very clear memories. Rosie looked skeptical but decided to let it go. She reached out one small finger and touched the baby's hand. Thomas's fingers closed around hers, instinctive and trusting. Oh, Rosie breathed. Mama, he's holding my hand. He knows you're his big sister. He's counting on you to teach him things. Like riding and reading and building snowmen. All of it. Everything you know. Rosie's face transformed with solemn purpose. I'll teach him everything. I'll be the best big sister in the whole world. I know you will, sweetheart. Caleb lifted Rosie up so she could get a better view. She leaned against his chest, still holding the baby's hand. Papa, this is our family now, right? You and Mama and me and Thomas. That's right. And we're gonna stay together forever. No more running. Caleb looked at Clara. Clara looked back at him. In that look was everything they'd been through: the blizzard, the fear, the healing, the love. No more running, Caleb said. This is home, forever. Rosie smiled and nestled closer, and in the cradle, baby Thomas slept on, peaceful and safe, surrounded by the family that had fought so hard to exist. The years that followed were good ones. Thomas grew strong and healthy, a happy child who followed his big sister everywhere and worshipped his father with uncomplicated adoration. Rosie grew into a confident young woman skilled with horses and herbs alike, her early fears nothing but distant memories. Clara's healing practice flourished. She trained 3 more apprentices over the years, establishing a tradition of women helping women that would outlast her own lifetime. The little room in Martha's store eventually grew into a proper clinic funded in part by Rosie's inheritance, serving the entire territory. Caleb's ranch prospered. The breeding program he'd dreamed of became reality, producing horses known throughout Montana for their strength and temperament. He trained young men to work the land, passing on skills that had been passed to him. And through it all, their love deepened and grew, weathering seasons of joy and sorrow, plenty and want, always emerging stronger on the other side. On the 10th anniversary of that fateful blizzard, Clara and Caleb sat on their porch, watching the sunset behind the mountains. Rosie was inside reading to Thomas by the fire. The sound of their voices drifted through the open window, punctuated by Thomas's occasional laughter. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" Clara asked, leaning against Caleb's shoulder. "I said a lot of things, most of them probably foolish. You said you were tired of failing, that if God gave you another chance, you wouldn't waste it." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "I remember. Have you wasted it?" He turned to look at her, this woman who had stumbled into his life half dead and desperate and transformed everything he thought he knew about himself. "Not a single day," he said. "Not a single moment." Clara smiled and kissed him softly. "Neither have I." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Inside, Rosie finished her story, and Thomas applauded. The horses in the corral whinnied softly. An owl called from somewhere in the pines. "I used to think hope was dangerous," Clara said quietly. "That wanting things only led to disappointment. That the safest thing was to expect nothing and be grateful for whatever scraps life threw your way. And now I know that hope is the only thing that keeps us alive. Without it, we're just surviving. With it, we're truly living." She took his hand and pressed it to her heart. "You taught me that, Caleb. You and Rosie and Thomas and this life we've built. You taught me that it's okay to want things, to dream, to believe that tomorrow might be better than today." Caleb brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "You taught me the same thing," he said. "Before you came, I was a ghost, walking through life, going through the motions, waiting for the end. You brought me back. You gave me a reason to live. We saved each other." "Yeah." He smiled, that rare full smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. "I guess we did." The last light faded from the sky. Stars emerged one by one, the same stars that had watched over them on countless nights, bearing witness to their struggles and their triumphs. Clara thought about the woman she'd been dying in the snow, certain that her story was ending. She thought about all the moments since, the fear and the courage, the pain and the healing, the loss and the love. She thought about Rosie, who had grown from a traumatized child into a confident young woman with her whole life ahead of her. About Thomas, who would never know a father's cruelty, only a father's love. About the community that had become her family, the work that had become her calling, the man who had become her home. Caleb. "Yeah. If you could go back, would you do anything differently? Would you still stop when you heard Rosie screaming in that storm?" He didn't hesitate. "I'd stop 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, every time." He pulled her close. "Finding you was the best thing I ever did, the best decision I ever made, and I'd make it again in every lifetime, in every universe, without a second thought." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy, of gratitude, of overwhelming love. "I'd choose you too," she whispered. "Every time, every lifetime, always." They held each other as the night deepened around them, Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful from the ashes of their pain. Inside, Rosie and Thomas laughed at some shared joke. The fire crackled warmly. The horses settled in their stalls. And outside, the first snow of winter began to fall soft and silent, blessing them all. Clara watched the snowflakes drift down, no longer seeing them as harbingers of death, but as promises of renewal. Every winter gave way to spring. Every ending held the seed of a new beginning. She had learned that lesson the hard way in blood and tears and desperate prayers. But she had learned it, and she would carry it with her for the rest of her days. "Ready to go inside?" Caleb asked. "In a minute. I just want to remember this." "Remember what?" Clara looked at him, at this man who had pulled her from the snow and nursed her back to life and given her everything she'd never dared to hope for. "This feeling," she said. "This moment. This perfect, impossible, beautiful life." Caleb kissed her forehead. "We've got a lot more moments ahead," he said. "A lot more memories to make." "I know, but I don't want to forget how far we've come. I don't want to take any of it for granted." "You won't. Neither will I." He stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Thornton, our family's waiting." Clara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. At the door she paused and looked back one more time at the falling snow, at the vast Montana sky, at the land that had become her home. Then she smiled and stepped inside into the warmth, into the light, into the arms of the family she had fought so hard to keep. The door closed softly behind her. And outside the snow continued to fall, covering the world, in white washing away the past, making everything new. Clara Thornton had come to Montana running from death. She had found life instead, life and love and a future she had never dared to imagine. Some storms destroy, others deliver us exactly where we need to be. This one had brought her home, and home, she finally understood, was not a place. It was the people who loved you, who fought for you, who refused to let you go. It was Caleb's steady hands and quiet strength. It was Rosie's fierce heart and boundless joy. It was Thomas's laughter and innocent trust. It was a cabin in the mountains warm against the cold. It was a community that had become a family. It was hope stubborn and defiant, blooming against all odds. Home was love in all its forms. And Clara Thornton, who had once believed she would never be loved again, was finally completely, irrevocably home. If this story touched your heart, the love, the struggle, and the courage that blooms where no one expects, then join us for more. Every week on Wild West Love Stories, we bring you tales where broken hearts find healing, where second chances rise from the dust, and where love proves stronger than any storm. So don't write off just yet. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and become part of our Frontier family. Drop a comment telling me what moved you most, and share this story with someone who needs to believe in hope again. Until next time, may your trails be peaceful, and your hearts forever wild.